Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Melanie. This is Adventures in Hostessville, and welcome to episode 20 of the Vintage Magazine Project and the final week of the May 1933 Everyday Science and Mechanics.
Ba-da-bum, ba-dum-bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
So the article I want to take a look at today is under New Money-Making Plans, and it is Modernistic Bookends for the Machinist. And these actually look pretty cool, I think, at least in the drawing. It does look that sort of like 1930s modern. And they say, here is an interesting novelty which virtually any machinist will relish and which should have a good sale in novelty and gift shops. Inasmuch as the material is basically junk, it is impossible to specify the approximate cost of the parts. And then they tell me that I should just go to my nearest automobile junkyard and get the materials out of it. I don't live by an automobile junkyard, and if I did, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't have giant circles of Bakelite or pieces of car running boards. So I'm going to try to make these out of my own personal junkyard, which is this box of stuff in my basement and I don't know what to do with. So I've got this broken hairdryer. I've got this piece for it, which is supposed to help you with your volume and curls. I don't have those things. I've got a blender that doesn't work anymore. And I have got, so many copies of my very first voiceover demo. And if the fact that they're on CD doesn't date me, knowing that one of the ads is for Xena the Warrior Princess probably does. So I'm gonna see if I can make some bookends out of these pieces. And so to start that off, I think I need to just take some of this stuff apart. So this magazine is Everyday Science and Mechanics, and you may have noticed we've been doing a lot of mechanics, but there is actually a fair amount of science in here as well, sort of latest events, such as, we've got this article on artificial sunlight, insects see the world in ultraviolet, double piston motor that needs no cooling, this guy that's invented a new test of acidity, which he is testing in this woman's mouth. And then here, there is this article that says, seesaw is a simple lifesaver. It's about this scientist, Dr. R.E. Cornish of the University of California, that has devised this method of resuscitating people who have died of asphyxiation or drowning or whatever. And he thinks that by putting them on this teeter-totter, he can get their blood flowing and their heart started again. And I thought I should find out more about this guy. So I looked him up. It turns out his name is Dr. Robert Cornish. And boy, oh boy, did I learn a lot about him. Okay, so Robert Cornish is not some crazy quack. He's actually a really smart guy, like almost Doogie Howser kind of smart. He graduates high school at 15. He's done with college by 18 with honors. And then he gets his doctorate and is a full-fledged doctor at 22. And he gets hired by the University of California, Berkeley, where he does various different areas of study, but the thing he's really interested in is resuscitation. Here's a thing I never really thought about. CPR didn't always exist, or we didn't always have it, codified or whatever. That doesn't happen until the 1950s. People have, of course, for hundreds of years, tried different things to restart the heart. Rectal fumigation with tobacco was one. So Cornish isn't doing that, but he comes up with this idea that if he can strap these people, like in the picture, to this teeter-totter and get them going back and forth, that will get their blood going again. It's not just that. He would also inject them with adrenaline and blood thinner and then puff oxygen into their mouth at the same time. So in general, maybe that would work. And he does actually, ooh, this is really dirty inside. Cool. So he works on it for a while, and he does try it on some people who have died, but he isn't able to bring them back to life. Largely, he thinks, because they've just been dead too long. So he decides he's going to try it with dogs. This is where the story gets really hard for me. I know that animal experimentation exists, but I don't like to think about dogs being harmed for anything. So 1932 is sort of when he comes up with this concept, and by 1933, when this magazine comes out, he's getting a bunch of attention for it. 1934, he starts these experiments on these rat terriers. There are 5 different rat terriers. He names them all Lazarus. And once he gets to Lazarus 4, he does actually manage to resuscitate this dog and start its heart again. Same thing with Lazarus 5, and he's like, success. I mean, maybe not if you ask Lazarus 1 through 3. The dogs do get their hearts beating again on their own, but they're blind, they can't stand up on their own, they clearly are brain damaged, so I don't know if he's actually ready to start experimenting on people. He thinks he is. University of California is like, oh, whoa, maybe not on our dime. And they let him go. But he's like, that's cool. I'm gonna keep working on this on my own. And you know what, while I'm at it, I'm gonna make a movie. Okay, so it's a lot more work to take apart a blender and a hairdryer than I realized. But I've got all of these pieces here, and I think the ones I'm gonna try and use are the buttons from the blender, this part of the motor casing from the blender, this exhaust part at the back of the hairdryer, and then these coils that I think were also from the hairdryer. I'm gonna start hot gluing stuff together because I can't weld it together because everything's plastic these days, and also I don't know how to weld. So Cornish decides he's gonna make this movie. It's technically Universal Studios, but once they see the preview of it, they're kind of like, no, actually, on second thought, we don't want to present this. So it doesn't get like a regular theatrical release. It does end up with sort of a roadshow release. This is in 1934, I think. Finally, in 1938, this company called Science and Arts, picks it up and they distribute it. But it's not good. It's not good. It's an hour long, which is far longer than it should be. Basically, the setup is that there are these 3 medical students, one of whom is Robert Cornish, played by Robert Cornish. He doesn't have any lines, which is probably a good idea. And then the one guy that goes off and takes the corporate gig, they won't let him work on his resuscitation anymore, so he goes into this depression, and ultimately, it's a long story, but the only way that he can win his son's, respect back or whatever is by bringing his son's dog, Scooter, back to life, because Scooter's been caught by the dog catcher and euthanized. So when the kid asks his dad, he's like, Dad, if you really love me, you'd bring Scooter back to life. And his dad's like, I'm not man enough. This needs Dr. Robert Cornish. And so this is where the movie gets really weird. No, it's been weird all along. This is where the movie gets even weirder. And it's because, now half of the movie is these actors, the dad and the kid and the other lady doctor and, all this stuff playing their roles. But then it's intercut with footage of actual Robert Cornish doing this actual resuscitation on actual Lazarus the dog. You'd think that when they were casting the part of Scooter the dog, they would have said, let's make it look like Lazarus. They don't. This dog is a completely different breed. It's a completely different color. So the kid's over there being like, Scooter, come on, you can do it, Scooter. And Robert Cornish is blowing oxygen into this dog's mouth, got him on the teeter-totter, and you're like, but wait a minute, that's absolutely not Scooter. This movie is not like a big hit, I don't think, partly because, to be fair, Universal decides not to really release it. But again, Cornish full-on claims success, and he says that he is ready now to try it on a person. He just needs a volunteer. And he doesn't get any until the mid-1940s, when he gets a letter from a death row inmate at San Quentin who's like, You try it on me. Okay, I have cobbled together this bookend. I actually think it looks sort of cool, but it definitely does look cobbled together. So what I'm gonna try and do is give it a coat of spray paint and see if that might make the whole effect a little bit more cohesive. I'm gonna do it in white because that is the color spray paint I have. All right, so the inmate in question is a guy named Thomas McMonigal, and he is not a good thing. I am not pro-death penalty, but you know, this guy belongs at least in jail. He is in jail for having murdered a 15-year-old girl. He's already served like 9 years at some other point for attempted rape. And he, like, when he finally confesses to the murder of this girl and takes them to where the body is, it's not her. It's somebody else. And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess that's where I put the other one. Let me think now. So he writes this letter to Cornish and says, you know what, like, you can resuscitate me. And Cornish is like, great, that's a fantastic idea. And he contacts San Quentin about it, and they're like, no, of course not, for multiple reasons. The first one being that he still hasn't figured out how to do it if it's been longer than 5 minutes. That's still the window he has. And they're like, this is lethal gas. That room has to air out for at least an hour before you can go in without dying. But then really what they're more concerned about is the legal dilemma, because they say, look, this guy, McMonigal, was sentenced to death. If we execute him and you bring him back to life, he's served that sentence. And we can't put him back in jail because double jeopardy. So we would have to just let him go. And that doesn't seem like the right plan. So it doesn't work out. And ultimately, I think in 1948, McMonigal is executed. And Cornish never really gets his person to try it on. He spends the rest of his life and career, which is about 15 more years, selling Dr. Cornish's tooth powder with vitamin D and fluoride. So there you go. That's the story of Robert Cornish. All right, there it is, my modernistic machinist's bookend. It looks, you know, it looks kind of modernistic. It looks more like Star Wars, but not the real name brand Star Wars, like the knockoff toys you get from the drugstore that are just called like space fights. This is Adventures in Hostessville, and welcome to, I don't know what episode this is.